a Gemara that we learned yesterday. We started at the beginning of the Masechta, Sota. We learned about the laws of kinui and stira, that the laws of a Sota have numerous rules. The law of a Sota, of a woman who has it's questionable if she had an affair. And the issue is that the husband might be prohibited to have marital relations with his wife, being that she had an affair with someone else. She sort of ruins the fidelity of the marriage, and she ruins the entire marriage, destroys the marriage. She's not allowed to be with her husband anymore. She's according to the letter of the law, she's deserving of a death penalty. Of course, if we don't have witnesses to the fact that she actually had an affair, then we can't give her that death penalty. But the marriage is basically broken until she can prove her innocence. And in this scenario, that's what the Sota is all about. It's that she will drink the water, and the water will actually prove her innocence and allow her and the husband to be back together again. But we can't allow that unless her innocence is proven, and therefore she has to go through this process. And how does the thing is that the process, when do you need to go through this process? So there has to actually be a warning at first, and a negation to that warning, that she a transgression to that warning, that she transgresses it, and she actually does go. The husband gives her a warning not to go in a secluded area with this woman, and she transgresses that, and she does go into a secluded area with she goes into a secluded area with that man, and so she transgressed that, and there's witnesses to it, both the warning and there's some type of witnesses to the actual seclusion, either according to Rabbi Eliezer, even one witness, or even the husband himself. But he definitely knows that she went into this secluded area. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you have to actually have two kosher witnesses that saw this. But ultimately, we know that there has been a number of situations that lead us to believe that she had an affair. What are these number of situations? Number one, he's warning her. Why is he warning her? Obviously, he saw something going on at first. Then he's warning her not to go into the secluded area, and then he actually sees her transgress it. So you got, number of situations, or he didn't see it, but there's witnesses to it, or there's a witness. Ultimately, there's a number of matters that are leading up to this assumption that there's a good chance that she might have had an affair. Now, so that's where the Mishnah is explaining to us what are those rules that will cause that the husband will be prohibited to his wife, and that will lead to her drinking the Sota water. And those rules are that there has to be a kinoi and there has to be a stira. Kinoi is a warning. Stira is going into seclusion with that man. And in the Mishnah debates, meaning there's an argument in the Mishnah between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, who, by the way, are very common. They're very well known for their debates throughout the Shas. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, always they're just like Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. So we got Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, and throughout the Gemara and the Midrashim as well. Numerous arguments between Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua. So here again we have them arguing about if the stira, the going into seclusion, does it need to have full-fledged witnesses, or is it even okay if you have one witness? Is it okay if it's just the husband knows it, or do you actually need kosher witnesses? And that's that argument, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua.
Rabbi, I'm sorry, I was off. The word stira.
Yeah.
means what? Contradiction, like a
No,
stira
no,
in the
makom
Gemara?
seser, makom seser, a hidden
Okay,
place,
it means seclusion.
seclusion.
Okay, thank you. No, because I know was it consistent with his warning? So does his warning have to be so particular? And does her actions have to be so contrary, point by point?
In other words, you're saying the word stira could mean a contradiction to the warning. That's what
Right.
you were thinking.
That's what. Right.
Uh-huh.
My misspelling looked at it as
No, it's not misspelling. It's spelled the same way. Stira.
okay. So
Stira is
it
spelled the same way. But I never thought of it that way. I always understood stira is a makom seser.
right, but does the
I have to see if I
Gemara
can prove it.
evaluate it from the perspective of the warning? How inconsistent was this action with the warning, or is it not that particular? He just has to
So
say, I don't want you to be alone with him. And she goes off, to the motel and comes back. So is that enough?
what more is there? You mean to the motel? You can't go to the motel with him. That's what you're saying, or is it just you can't go to any makom seser, any
Okay,
secluded
so
place? Okay, so
you're already
that's your question. You need to be more
right.
specific. Yeah, it doesn't seem that way. It seems that the understanding I have is that it's any makom seser. It doesn't have to be specific.
Thank
That's
you. Sorry
that's
for
my
the
understanding.
interruption.
Yeah, no problem.
Rabbi,
Yes, David.
this thing about the Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, is the halacha usually like one rather than the other?
I believe the halacha often is Rabbi Yoshua. It's brought down in different places in Shas that Rabbi Eliezer Shamutihi, which either means he was in Cherem or it means that he was from Beis Shammai. So the halacha, as far as I know, follows Rabbi Yeshua often. So the Mishnah had said that what is the type of warning that we're talking about? It basically tells us that the warning is not you can't go speak to that man. It's not that the husband warns his wife, don't go talk to him. That warning, that's fine. He can make such a warning, but that's not going to be connected to the concept of Sota. If he says it to her, he can warn her and tell her not what he wants, what he doesn't want. But the laws of Sota, that doesn't have any impact on. The laws of Sota is that he has to tell her not to go into a secluded area with that man. And if she transgresses that and she waits a certain amount of time, the amount of time that it would take to have just minimal relations, that would already be considered that's considered enough to be called a stira, going into a place of seclusion, and that would be would obligate her to drink the Sota water if they want to continue being married together and so on. Now, the Mishnah ends off that what are the prohibitions and the laws of this woman before she drinks the Sota water? So number one is she's asura levesa, she's prohibited to her house, which means that she's prohibited to her husband. She's asura lechol betruma, she's prohibited to eat truma. If her husband's a kohen and she is a Israelite, she would be prohibited to eat truma. And that if he dies without children, meaning they don't have any children, and the husband dies before she drinks the Sota water, then the husband's brother would normally have a mitzvah to marry or yibum, and if they don't want to get married, they do chalitza. But initially the encouragement is that they should do yibum, they should get married. The husband should want his brother's name to stay, that the family will basically stay in existence. There will be children, and can be considered as if the husband's family is who passed away is still in existence if they have children. And so normally it's encouraged they should do yibum, they should get married. But here, because she is in a certain sense not a good wife. She's not a righteous wife. She's not a pure, so to speak. She's gotten herself into some questionable situations. So we don't want to push her onto this brother of the husband. We're not going to encourage him to have to marry her. Instead, the law is chayletzes v'leimes yabemis, and of course we'll see in the Gemara, where that's learned from exactly. But that's the idea that there's chalitza. We encourage the chalitza. Chalitza is a form really of divorce. It's a form of divorce. Why? Because when a person gets married, that marriage also carries over, if the man dies, to the man's brother. If the man dies without children, so in a certain sense, it carries over to, there's like a connection between the woman, the widow, and the man's brother, the husband's brother. And they're supposed to be married. She's called a zokuk liyibum. She's obligated to be married to the yavam, to her brother-in-law, and that is sort of like a semi-marriage already there. And she needs, in order to break away from that, be totally free from him, there needs to be a chalitza done, and where she removes his shoe and spits on the ground, and ultimately she is permitted to marry other men, and she doesn't have to just marry this brother. She no longer can marry this brother because the chalitza is done. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes, and a Kohen cannot marry a chalutza.
Right, a Kohen can marry a chalutza.
Right, and I think I mentioned...
Although that might be drabanan. I'm not sure if that's biblical or rabbinic. Is a chalitza aser daraisa or drabanan? I'd have to look it up. There's a Taisvus I think in Tractate Makkos about it. I have to take a look. But yeah. But anyway, it's prohibited. Correct.
Right, and I think I mentioned in a previous year that when I was in my 20s and dating, I'm going for shidduchim. They once wanted to set me up with this girl, and it turns out that she was a chalutza,
wow.
which is very rare for a woman in her 20s.
Yeah. In general, chalitza is very rare. I was actually once at a chalitza ceremony, but it's something that very few people ever see. And it's I mean, in a certain sense, it's a sad thing that there is to ever have such a thing. But there actually was a case not that long ago where
I'm sure it's on YouTube already.
Oh, that I don't know. It was in 2001, maybe 2002. So anyway, but there was so I don't know. It wasn't as popular for people to be videoing everything in those days. People had the flip phones in those days. But there was a case where a man passed away, and the brother was very young. And so the woman had to wait, like, I don't know, 8 years or something, 10 years till she was not able to get remarried until he becomes an adult and they can do the actual chalitza. And so she had to wait like 8-10 years till he became a bar mitzvah, and a very sad situation. But yeah, she had to wait until then. Anyways, but
there was some type of an Israeli movie that they made about chalitza, and the young boy, actually he became a teenager. He wanted to marry the woman, and I think he married the woman. Or is anybody familiar with this?
So I'm not familiar with it. Not surprising. I don't really see movies much, but or any. But the thing is,
you don't
that
sit all day with social media.
No,
I
But
remember the movie.
Just Jewish stuff.
you what did you say, Ezra? You remember the movie? Oh,
I remember the movie, and I think uh, she didn't want him. She didn't want him to marry her because of the fact that that they have to go through because of the process. She wanted him to marry her because he wanted to marry her irrespective of the. And so I think they did go through chalitza, and then when he became older, he did marry her.
oh, I don't know if they're allowed to. That's after you do chalitza. I don't think they're allowed to get married. Then she's a brother. So it's like marrying a brother-in-law. You can't marry a brother-in-law. It would be a. I think I don't think that is that the story. That's interesting. Yeah. Now, but the thing is that in Ashkenazic communities, this is what I was going to tell you, David, that there is a difference between Ashkenazic and Sephardic communities. In Sephardic communities, I believe they still do yibum today, and they actually will marry the brother to the widow. But in Ashkenazic communities, it became traditional just to do chalitza. And the reason has to do with the fact that in order to do yibum, when they get married and they have relations, he has to have in mind that he's doing yibum during the relations. And I guess because we're nervous that he'll just have in mind that he's enjoying it rather than doing the mitzvah of yibum, and therefore we don't do yibum anymore. But the official halacha is that yibum is supposed to be a priority over chalitza, but unfortunately we don't do it anymore. We only do chalitza now in Ashkenazi communities. Again, I think in Sephardic communities they do yibum and encourage it maybe. So getting back to here, so the law of this Sota woman is that she would be an exception to the Sephardic rule, and we would not allow yibum. In other words, in Ashkenazi communities, we never do yibum. We do chalitza, but even in Sephardic communities, this would be, this would be such a. Of course, nowadays you don't have much of a site anymore, but we'll see about that. What happens if a person does have a site? We don't have the water to give to drink. It would actually prohibit them from being married for the rest of their life because she is supposed to drink the water and there's no water for her to drink. It's a whole problem nowadays. We'll have to see when it comes up in the Gemara that mentions this issue. Now, so the Mishnah basically told us the laws of kinoi and stira, and what the argument about having witnesses for the stira, for the seclusion, that two witnesses see that they went into, they transgressed on the warning, and she went into a secluded area with this man, and then what the law is until she drinks the water, that she would be prohibited levesa to her house. Rashi adds in that something from the Gemara later on that says vinitma'a 3 times. That the word vinitma'a it refers to 3 prohibitions, and it's hinting to, or it's alluding to 3 rules about a Sota. One is that she's prohibited to her Baal, her husband. Another one is that she's prohibited to her Bayel, to the person who she had relations with or might have had relations with, and which means if the husband dies or divorces her, and that she would be usher to Truma. She'd be prohibited to eat Truma if her husband passes away. The Mishnah doesn't mention the case of Asura Labayel. Interestingly enough, it doesn't mention in our Mishnah that she's prohibited to a person who she had relations with. And seemingly the reason is because at the moment she's married to her husband. So that would only take effect if the husband divorces her, or if he dies. And now the truth is, the Mishnah does mention a case if he dies, and it doesn't mention that she's usher labayel. So it is a little maybe surprising why the Mishnah doesn't mention about being usher labayel. She's usher to the one she had relations with. I mean, the only thing is that just like they had relations before, it's not like they're worried about the
with whom
prohibition.
she was secluded.
Secluded with, right? Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but saying she had relations with yet
Uh,
is different than with whom she secluded.
Forget about my wording, but
Oh,
why doesn't
sorry.
the Mishnah say Laboyel? Why doesn't the Mishnah say that she's prohibited to be with the one she was secluded with and she was warned against?
There were three. One was her
Baal, the
husband.
husband. One is the Boyel, the one she is she has been
With whom
secluded
she was secluded,
with.
and
And then she's
three
ushered a
truma.
truma. The third is truma.
Okay.
So the question is, why doesn't the Mishnah mention the Boyel, that she's prohibited to be with the person she's secluded with?
Okay.
The Mishnah Rashi mentions it. The Gemara mentions it. Not sure why the Mishnah doesn't mention it. Why doesn't the Mishnah mention that? But the thing is that just like she had relations with, or she might have had relations with this guy who she's secluded with before, she doesn't really care if she's prohibited or not. He doesn't care and she doesn't care. So the Mishnah is talking about situations where sort of like there are halachas about and that people might keep. And this is maybe not so applicable. Like, why are you telling her what she's allowed to do, what she's not allowed to do? They already transgressed the halacha once with being secluded. It's not like they care. Maybe, yeah. In other words, this is more practically what is, what they need to know what the halacha is. The fact that she's secluded with the man and she might have had relations with him. It sounds like she might not care what she's allowed to be with him or not. But the halacha would apply that the rabbi wouldn't be allowed to marry them off. The halacha would be applicable for a rabbi if they want to get married in an official way. But so it's bothering me why the Mishnah doesn't say that. Again, it could be because it's not something that they're going to listen to anyway. So that could be maybe a reason. I don't know. I didn't see anything on this. I don't know if you see anything in the commentaries, Robert or David. But in any event, the Mishnah mentions the two prohibitions. It doesn't mention that third. Now, the Gemara then said that the Mishnah is coming from the continuation of the previous tractate. And there's a connection there. What is the connection from the previous tractate? Connection is that the previous tractate talked about prohibiting oneself from wine and other things, and it's called a nazir. And so it fits to have the portion of Sota right next to it, which is basically similar to the Torah. The Torah also puts the two together. And the reason why the Torah puts the two together is, which is what Rebbe is the source of this is, and it's in Parshas Nasai, and in Parshas Nasai, so you have this the portion that talks about Nazir and the portion that talks about Sota, and let me pull it up over here. And the in Parshas Nasai, 1 second, Parshas Nasai, so. I believe it's in Shani over here. Let's see. Let's see. No. Revi. So it says Ish Kisista Ishta. It talks about Saita. And then right after Saita, it talks about it talks about Nazirus. So it has Saita and then Nazir. So Rebbe has a whole explanation. You know why it mentions in the Torah Nazir right after Saita? The reason is because if a person sees a Saita in her Bikilkula, which Rashi translates to mean while they're embarrassing her and making lessening, making her feel lowly, by nivel and boishes, by they do things to embarrass her to try to get her to admit so that we don't have to erase Hashem's name in the water. So when they see the Sota going through her embarrassment, so a person would make a promise, a vow that he doesn't want to get into this problem. Or, people say, "Oh boy, look at what happens to such a situation. We shouldn't drink wine, because drinking wine could lead to such things. These type of situations. People lose themselves and get indulge too much in things, and they might indulge in such a sin. So better we should separate ourselves from wine. So a person who sees a Sota will make a neder, make a vow not to drink wine. Yazer atzmi min hayayin. And so Rebbe's vart, that insight of Rebbe about the psukim actually fits with the Gemara. So the Gemara does the same thing, or the Mishnah, I should say, because the previous Mishnahs were about Nazir, previous tractate. Now this tractate is Sota. So it's the same idea that, you see a Sota B'Kukula. Now, I mentioned Rashi's Pshat B'Kukula. I should mention also there's another insight that it means the Sota when she explodes, when she blows up. A person who sees that, he says, "Uh-oh, I don't want to indulge in wine and chas v'shalom have such a situation, and therefore I'm not going to drink wine." So there's two meanings of kilkula, but either way, there's a connection between a nazir and a Sota. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that a person's going to actually become a full-fledged nazir. And actually, make a full, because the truth is, the Gemara talks about if a Nazir is called a chote, is a sinner. So not that we're encouraging someone to do that, but the fact that they will learn and do something similar to a Nazir, meaning they won't be the full-fledged Nazir. A Nazir is not necessarily a good thing. We don't necessarily encourage it. We often have a rule that dayecha masha asra Torah, it's enough for you. What the Torah prohibits, that you shouldn't be making extra laws.
He's
and
too from.
Yeah,
He's
over
from, right.
And so therefore there is a concept that maybe you shouldn't be a Nazir, but still doesn't mean that you should indulge. It means that you should learn from be similar to a Nazir. And you see the Sota, but Kula, you see the Sota in her situation, and you decide you remove yourself from, to some extent at least, from wine, from indulging in wine and so on, and frivolous activities. Now, and so that's what the Gemara understands as why Sota comes after Nazir. The only problem with that is that the psukim have Sota first and then Nazir, and the Gemara has Nazir first and then Sota. Now, if we're telling someone who sees the Sota get messed up, then we should, and therefore they're going to become a Nazir, then Sota should be first and Nazir should be after. And the Gemara is the opposite. So the Gemara asked that question, and the Gemara answered that no. First we have Ksubas, then we have Nidarim, then we have Nazir, and then we have Sota. So the Gemara has a whole long list of understanding how we ended up getting to Sota. That you're right. Really, logically, maybe Sota should be first before Nazir if you want to follow Rebbe's insight to the full extent of his insight, of his teaching. You might want to have Sota first and then Nazir, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And the reason it doesn't have to be perfect is because there's a connection, Nazir and Sota, and that's really what we're basing it on. We can't put Nazir later because the whole series has a certain flow to it. What's the flow? Ksubis has something about Nidarim, has something about vows. So then we have to have Nidarim after Ksubis. And then Nidarim is very similar to Nazir, because Nazir is also a type of vow. And Nidarim is a general vow, and Nazir is a specific vow about the wine and not taking a haircut and not going to the cemetery. So that Nazir is a specific type of vow. And then once you have Nazir, then you need to have Sota, because like Rebbe said, that they're connected. Would it be ideal maybe to have Nazir after Sota? Yeah, but the flow doesn't work that way. The flow is Ksubas, Nidarim, Nazir, Sota. So that's how the connection between Sota and Nazir is based on Rebbe's vart. And that's how the Gemara explains it. It's Sota is like Rebbe, and you have this idea that there's a connection there. You see Sota, you want to be, a person would want to be a Nazir. Or the idea is that the way the Mishnah puts it, in a certain sense, is sort of do the Nazir so that you don't come to becoming a Sota. In other words, the pasuk is telling you, you see it, you're going to become that way. You're going to want to make yourself a Nazir. The Mishnah is telling you, become a Nazir so that you don't end up becoming a Sota, having your wife be a Sota. Okay. Now comes the next Gemara. The next Gemara is based on the grammar of the Mishnah, where it calls it hamakane, a person who does kinui, makes he makes a warning, gives a warning to his wife. If a person did that, what's the law? And that implies that maybe you shouldn't be doing this, but if you did it, then this is the law. Why doesn't it say like a mitzvah to do it? It should make it like a more honorable type of thing. A person who sees his wife going off the path should be makani. It's a mitzvah to be makani as well. That's what you would think the Mishnah would say. Instead, the Mishnah starts off, if you did this, okay, this is what you got to do. So the Mishnah gives the implication that that it's maybe not ideal. This is not what a person should do if even if he can, even if it makes sense to do it. Sounds like the Mishnah is saying, don't do it. So the Gemara says, you're right. Our Tana actually holds that way. There's another way of looking at it, but our Tana actually learns this way, that this is that that it's better not to do a kinoi, that it's not something that we encourage, according to the Tana of our Mishnah, and the reason would be, Rashi brings over here, that it's mevi atzmai lidei tagar ves ishtoi lidei nivol va'afilu hi tahira. You're bringing yourself into a fight and your wife into an embarrassment, and even she might be tahar. And so it's this is against the rules of like Avas Yisrael, and you don't have a proof, and so you're starting up and making waves. And maybe it would have been better to not warn her. Now, of course, the commentaries do ask, what do you mean, really? You shouldn't warn her? So, wouldn't it be, isn't this appropriate to maybe give her, if he sees his wife hanging out with someone, what he's going to do? Not going to warn her? In other words, he hasn't seen her sin, true, but still, he sees her getting friendly and getting maybe too friendly with someone. And so he shouldn't warn her. Again, this is not talking about in today's day and age, because in today's day and age, we don't have Sota water, so we don't want to ever lead into, but this is talking about in the time of the Gemara, in the time of the time of Beis Hamikdash, I should say. And then would it have been appropriate to warn a wife? And the Gemara seems to be saying that at least the Mishnah holds that it's not appropriate to warn his wife. And why not? If he sees her going off, seemingly that would be a good reason to warn her so she doesn't fall into a trap. In other words, it's not automatic that a person means to sin initially, but sometimes things lead to things and it ends up that way. And so he's going to stop her in the bud, and therefore she won't end up flowering into an act of a sin, a terrible sin. So basically, just stop it when it's brewing. So one of the commentaries says that the Tosfos Harosh asked this question, and he explains that there's a whole argument. Are you allowed to just go? Would a person be allowed to divorce his wife? It's an argument in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, I should say. The Mishnah that talks about it. So he says that according to the opinion that that person's allowed to divorce his wife, so according to that opinion, just without any reason, or with a very simple reason. So according to that opinion, then maybe this person, the Mishnah is encouraging him to just get divorced. She's doing things inappropriately. She's acting in a pretus way. Maybe you should just divorce her instead of warning her. Warning her makes a whole big scene. Divorce is done and over. I don't know if they didn't understand what happens in today's day and age in the courts, but maybe in those days, I guess it was like a done deal. You just give a divorce and it's over. But the opinion that says
Did they have lawyers in those days?
I mean, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, what does it say? Ka'orchei hadayanim, right? Like the lawyers. The Mishnah talks about you got the wording there, but a tayan. Maybe they probably did. Sounds like
ask Isaac. Maybe he knows.
Yeah.
No, nothing. I know when it came to divorce, anything I would fight over. That was basically my whole practice. But I never got involved in divorce law. Fighting over children, I couldn't live with it, so I didn't do it. But I'll take the house out from under you. No problem.
Okay, so anyway, the bottom line is that there are two opinions. There are three opinions really about when a person can divorce his wife. And one opinion is that you need to find in her an ervas davar, that he knows she sinned. He finds in her that she sinned, she had an affair, maybe you can't prove it or whatever, but you know it. So then that would be a reason, a grounds for divorce. And other than that, a person shouldn't get divorced or can't get divorced. And the other opinions are more lenient. She burnt his food, which basically means that you don't have to have a reason, or it could basically just get divorced, or at least even if it's a small reason. And then there's another opinion that even if you find someone better, to get divorced. And so the other two reasons seem to be very, basically it's a person is free to get divorced pretty much whenever they want. So the understanding here would be that a person shouldn't be warning his wife, because at least that understanding is that if you could get divorced, a person could get divorced when he sees his wife acting in an inappropriate way, then that the Mishnah held that would be more advisable than to start this whole series, and then ultimately it's going to lead to, if she's really so sinful, she's going to end up getting caught, and it's going to be a series of things, and it's going to end up making a whole scene, and it's the divorce would be ideal rather than going through this whole process. Now, the other opinion, that you can't get divorced only if you find that she really had a full-fledged sin of ervas davar, of an actual affair. So according to that opinion, then it's a mitzvah to do kinoi, to do it this way, because a person can't get divorced. So then they would have to. So that would be where the Mishnah is saying, the Mishnah holds that makane is not ideal. Maybe it would be better to get divorced. That sounds like an interesting insight. In other words, this insight is of the understanding, according to the Tues Harash, that a woman who's acting inappropriately, like there's already at least he sees it as if it's this serious that he has to warn her, that's already maybe more ideal for him to get divorced. It's a very it seems like a very extreme view that he would be encouraged to get divorced. I guess if it's a situation where he's already needs to warn her, that's already a situation where it would be better to get divorced. That sounds a little extreme to me, but this is one of the understandings here. Again, we're trying to explain what does the Gemara mean when it says that it's only b'diavad. It's if a person warned his wife, and like it's better if he doesn't warn her. Why would it be better? It doesn't warn her. So the simple understanding of the Gemara was that don't mix in, if you know she'd sinned, one thing, you don't start this whole situation over here that that you're doing a kinui, and then it might lead to a stira, and it might lead to this and that. If you see she sinned, that's one thing. You don't, she's probably not going to sin. All Jews are kosher. That would be the simple understanding here. But the way the Tues Rosh wants to explain it is like the opposite. That instead of warning her, it'd be better to divorce her. Because if she needs a warning, be ideal to divorce. You can't divorce her, then you're not allowed to divorce her according to those opinions. That you can't divorce her according to that opinion, then you would basically do a kino. You do a warning to her. So it's like taking the exact opposite approach. The simple approach is you're not allowed to warn her. Stay married, be happily married. No, you can't warn her because you shouldn't warn her because really it's better to divorce her. So I guess the way the Tues Rosh is understanding it is that people aren't just warning their wife when they just see a little some little act of she seems to be getting a little too friendly. It must have reached a stage where she's really, where it's really unsneous and really inappropriate. And already you see what's going on. And there, the Tues Rosh is, at least in his country, wherever he lived, he said that would be the understanding of this Tana would be that a divorce would be more ideal than warning her.
And killing her is not an option.
So anyway, that's the Gemara's understanding of the Mishnah Hamekane, where the grammar of the Mishnah is that it sounds like you're not supposed to do a warning. Now that, of course, is a subject of debate. We'll see later that there are other opinions. Now the Gemara then mentions that Reish Lakish used to have an introduction to Tractate Sota. What was his introduction? The introduction to Tractate Sota was Ein mezavgin loy la'adam isha ela lefi ma'asav, that a person's wife is very similar to him. That, don't think that, a person's wife, she's not so righteous. He's the very righteous guy. It goes hand in hand. And that's how zivugim are. And Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he endorses this idea, and he stamps it, and he says, and that's why it's so hard, like Kriyas Yamsuf. In other words, it's a very complicated thing, because how do you get people that are so comparable? Every person is so different. You're going to get a husband and a wife that are so similar in their actions that they're both on the same level. Everyone, has a certain score. You're going to get two people that are both, 75s or two, 63s. They're going to be so exact with Maisav that this person is this woman and this man, they're both so exact in their mitzvahs and their averas and their type of the ways they sin and their actions, their merits. So
if you're blessed, yes.
So it's kosher. It means it's hard for Hashem it's hard to match people up, to find two people that are so exact. So it's kosher l'zavgon kikriyas yamsuf. So this is Reish Lakish's statement that zivug is lafi ma'asav. Now, where do we come on to that? Where does this come into the picture here? Why are we talking about if what the husband is and what the wife is? Why we're talking about the woman sinned. That's what we're dealing with. A woman that's acting somewhat frivolous and inappropriate with other men. And what is Reish Lakish? How is he mixing in this idea that, by the way, you should know that the person's marriage is always very similar, the husband and the wife. What is he coming to explain? So the commentaries discuss this, and they say, what is Reish Lakish coming to answer? And so they say that one answer is that the pasuk talks about the man. Whenever it talks about Sota, it mentions a person whose wife is going off. it starts off, it's like the picture is based on the man and based on the man, and then it mentions the wife. It would seem like we're dealing with the wife here. Why does the verse in the Torah, again, we're talking about Parshas Nosoi, where it talks about the laws of a Sota. It mentions more, it's all like based around the man. It mentions the laws of Sota. Why is that? So Reish Lakish says, you know why? Because really it goes hand in hand. It's all based, the man is the same as he's like the cause. If he wouldn't have been himself a little frivolous, then his wife wouldn't be acting this way either. It's because of who he is that she's that she is that way. And they wouldn't have given him. Don't think that, that he's getting a wife that's so so different than him. And is that, no, the reason he got her is because they're very, very similar. And so that's how he's explaining the pasuk, that it's explaining that he's at fault, so to speak, or it's not only her, it's him as well, and maybe even him because of him. And another understanding is that the Gemara just explained that Nidarim or Nazir and Sota go hand in hand. And the Gemara concluded that really it would have been better, seemingly it would have been better if Sota was before Nazir. Because Sota really comes, really as you see the Sota, then the person wants to do Nazir. So Reish Lakish wants to answer that problem. The Gemara answered it, but not a very strong answer. The Gemara's answer was, we sort of like can't do it that way. We can't put it in that order because it's a whole series of tractates that have a connection, and the connection flows this way, even though ideally maybe Sota would have been better. Comes Reish Lakish and says no, that the marriage of a person is according to his actions. The spouse of a person, of a man, is according to his actions. And if he would have acted in a way that was appropriate, that he would be separating himself from wine, then she would not have come to, then his wife wouldn't be a Sota. The whole reason why his wife is a Sota is because he wasn't a Nazir, that the Nazir leads to Sota. If he's acts in a way that he's not taking a lesson from Nazir, if he's not acting in a way of a Nazir, so then his wife, that's why he's getting a wife that might be a Sota. So in other words, Reish Lakish is explaining what the Gemara ended off before, that it's that it would have been ideal for Sota to be first and then Nazir afterwards. That no, it doesn't say it that way, and it doesn't need to be that way because it's based on this idea that ein mazavkin loy la'adam isha el lefi ma'asav, that it goes by the husband, and if the husband would have been careful about the concept of nazirus, if he would have been careful not to indulge in wine and himself act in an inappropriate way, then he wouldn't have this issue of a Sota, and he wouldn't have never married, never would have gotten such a wife. And obviously, because he didn't act in the proper way of a Nazir, so then his wife, he ends it up with a wife that's also the same in the same league. Now, in the final answer that the commentaries give is that the reason why Reish Lakish is mentioning this idea that a person's spouse is very similar to him, and it's according to his actions, that's what he gets. That's who his spouse is. So the Gemara is trying to explain, why would it be a bad thing or a prohibition to warn one's wife? And the Gemara is sort of explaining, why you shouldn't warn her? The reason is because you should be looking into your own things before you're starting to warn your wife. In other words, we all love to pass on the blame. Look at what that person is doing. Look at what that person is doing. Look at what she did. She did this terrible thing. Really, it's really starting from him. And so Reish Lakish is explaining, you know why it's only Hamakane? You know why it's only B'diavad that person warns his wife? So the reason why a person is not preferably supposed to warn her is because he should start with himself. And it shouldn't be starting with her, starting to warn her. He should start with himself. Now, he doesn't develop this thought completely. This is from a sefer called Bris Yaakov. And the way he concludes is, what's it going to help if you warn her? He should have. It's really too late. He should have fixed up his own actions. But I'm thinking that maybe you could sort of like twist give another understanding based on that idea. Again, so this sort of answers our other problem. Our other problem was, what should you do? You shouldn't warn. Person shouldn't warn his wife. His wife is acting. So we saw the Taisus Harush, which I must say was a little hard to relate to. That you shouldn't warn her because better to get divorced. That sounds to me a little extreme, getting divorced for such a matter that maybe she might change if a person warns her. To me, it's Taisus Harush's understanding is a little hard to relate to, I guess. But maybe this is an answer to that question. In other words, this is what he's really answering, and he's saying, you know why it's better not to that it would be preferable not to warn her, is that not exactly the way it's explaining it here, that it's your fault. You should have started with yourself. What are you jumping to her now? But more that if you would work on yourself now, that will automatically have an impact. It'll have a domino effect on her, and she won't be acting this way. You will be able to influence her. Knows that you're the cause of this. You got her. But if you change, and you used to be this way, and you change, it'll actually impact her, that she's going to see from you. You are very similar. Your aim person's shidduch is very similar to, they're going to be similar in similar acts of righteousness. And she sees you changing yourself. So if you would change, that's what you should be doing. Changing yourself, she'll see you sitting down all of a sudden. Instead of watching these movies, you're sitting and learning. Instead of watching these inappropriate things, newspaper stuff, and who knows what, TV, and sees you busy with doing mitzvahs and things like that. It's going to impact her, and maybe and that would be a better idea than to start with the kinoi. No, it's the same concept. Like, what are you jumping to go warn her? We love, it's her fault. She's doing terrible averu. It started with you. Aim is the person, it's all because it's all about you got her because you're on very similar things. If she's doing it, you probably also are similar in a similar way, doing such sins. Maybe not in the same exact method, but it's based on, and therefore the idea is that, so what should you do? You should fix yourself, and ultimately that will be a way of doing better than a kinoi. That'll make a more smooth change in her rather than the starting a war with her. So maybe that answers this. Okay, so now we have a little better understanding, I think, of this concept over here about kinoi, if it's good, if it's bad. Now, what does this really mean? Kashel azavgon kekriyas yamsuf. It's hard to be mezavig them like the kriyas yamsuf, like it was hard for Hashem, so to speak, to split the sea. So Rashi, interestingly enough, emphasizes here that the pasuk says, Moishev Yechidim Baisa, Moitzi Asirim B'Kaisharis, that Hashem puts Yechidim, individuals, together in a house. He's mazavig people together. He connects them together. And he took us out of being slaves, Asirim. We were locked up, so to speak. We were tied down and as slaves. And he takes us out because sharois in a kosher time, in a perfect temperature, where it's not too hot, not too cold, not too rainy. He took us out of Egypt in a perfect month, and
He
and
says
so
here prosperity. Because
well, Rashi says in a month that's kosher, in a kosher month that's not chama, not sina, not hot, not cold. I don't know if the word prosperity would that fit to what you're saying. Would the word prosperity fit that it's in a prosperity in a month that's not too hot, too cold? I don't know if that's Rashi's understanding. David, is that word? I mean, prosperity to me sounds more like wealth.
Yeah, that's the way he translates the pasuk.
Okay, well, Rashi learns that it means that it's in a good month, that it's a time that it's not too hot and too cold. And what seems from Rashi might be that just like Hashem made it so perfect when they left Mitzrayim, they left Egypt, that he found the exact, Hashem chose the exact time that it would be a perfect time to leave, with the weather, according to the weather, and that it shouldn't be
beautiful spring morning, just like Cecil B. DeMille made in the movie, with the sun out and everybody walking comfortable.
So the same preciseness of perfection is the way Hashem matches people up. That's the connection. That it's similar to the preciseness of the weather of taking us out of Egypt. That preciseness, again, Rashi doesn't spell it out as much as I'm saying it, but that seems to be what he's emphasizing. There is another interpretation here, but Koisharis. Rashi's emphasizing this Koisharis. Why is Rashi saying that? It talks about taking the Jews out of Egypt, talks about putting people together. Rashi could just say, you're putting two people together. It's like leaving Egypt, which means when Hashem split the sea. You could just answer it that way. And Rashi doesn't have to delve into what's Koisharis. Rashi delves into it. Not only that, Rashi translates Koisharis in a more literal way. Then there's another Gemara that translates it a little differently. There's a Gemara that translates it Bechi in Shirais, when they said Shira, that the Yidden, when they said Shira, talking about by the Yamsuf. So that would be another way of translating it, that Hashem took us out with Bechi, with crying. The Egyptians were crying. The Jews were saying Shira. So Hashem took us out at a time when Koisharos, and that's referred, and that's similar to Zivugim, Moshev Yechidim Baiso, which is Zivugim, matches. Making a match is very similar to the Exodus from Egypt. But Rashi doesn't translate that.
He explains why he says prosperity here. He says Hashem takes out single individuals and causes them to dwell in a house by properly matching a man to a woman. This is similar to the Exodus from Egypt, which culminated in the splitting of the Red Sea, where he released prisoners into prosperity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, that it's a nice interpretation. It's not mentioned by Rashi, and it's not that Gemara. So it's an alternative interpretation. Maybe he has another source for that. But Rashi here emphasizes the Koisharis. Thanks, David, for bringing it. But Rashi here emphasizes Koisharis. So it sounds like maybe what he's saying is that the same preciseness that Hashem chose to let the Jews leave Egypt, that's the preciseness that Hashem makes matches the husband and wife. And so that's the connection of that. It's hard to find a perfect match. It's not too humid, not too not too dry, not too this, not everything seems perfect. The same thing as with the match, that it's exact, that is very precise. The matches. That's the connection to Kriyas Yamsuf. Okay, well, we're gonna stop here. We'll talk a little more about it, Metz Hashem, tomorrow. Zai gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.